Hello and welcome back to another episode of TheFIX, a show about post-processing and the cool and creative things we get to do with our images after the shoot. I'm Seán Duggan, your host, and on today's show we're going to be taking a look at some quick tips for working with the iOS Photos app on the iPhone and the iPad. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for tuning in and joining me. I do appreciate that. So before we get started, I've got a couple of quick announcements. The first is regarding the book giveaway, which is generously sponsored by Rocky Nook Press. The next book giveaway is coming back next week, so be sure you tune in for next week's show for a chance to win the Rocky Nook book of your choice. They've got a lot of really interesting and fine photography books. If you want to get a preview, head over to their website, rockynook.com, and check them out. But that book giveaway will be coming up again next week. The other thing I wanted to mention is that since today's show is all about working with the Photos app on iOS devices, iPhones and iPads, I did want to mention again that I have a workshop coming up at the end of July, July 31st, at the Image Flow in Mill Valley, California. And that workshop is on iPhoneography, creative capture, and processing techniques. We originally had it scheduled for Saturday, July 30th, and that one filled up so fast that we added a second class on Sunday, July 31st. So there are still some spots open in that class, but it is filling up as I speak. So if you are in the San Francisco Bay Area and are interested in that, I will put a link in the show notes for you to check that out. And if you're not familiar with where Mill Valley is, it's just north of San Francisco, just kind of on the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge, on the north side of the Golden Gate Bridge. All right, so on to the main topic for this show, which is working with the iOS Photos app. I did want to clarify that I'm going to be talking about the Photos app as it pertains to the iPhone or the iPad. So there is a Photos app that is on the Mac OS, but I'm not going to be talking about that. Really is a whole other conversation, so I'm not going to cover that in this show. I'm really just going to be looking at the iOS Photos app on the iPhone or on the iPad. And I'm going to be concerning myself mainly with tips for how to organize your photos, the difference between the camera roll and other albums, how to create albums, how to reorganize your albums, searching for images, things like that, as well as some tips to make it easier for you to find photos to open up into other apps, so you don't have to be endlessly scrolling through your camera roll to find pictures that were taken 4 months ago. I've got some tips that it will smooth the way and speed the process for bringing those images, finding those images, and bringing them into other apps. So without further ado, let's fire up my iPhone and dive in and check out the iOS Photos app. What I want to start off with in this exploration of some quick tips regarding iOS Photos is how iOS Photos organizes your images. And our first stop in that overview is the camera roll. So I'm going to tap on my Photos icon here, and that is going to bring me to my albums. Let me draw your attention to the camera roll at the top of the list there. And let me also cop to the fact that, yes, it is incredibly embarrassing that I have nearly 13,000 images in my camera roll. That's what happens when you have a 128 gigabyte iPhone, and you also like to hang on to a lot of images in case you are delayed with a canceled flight, you're stuck in an airport, and you just want to play with images and do some processing. But let me also mention here that all of these images, at least up to a few days ago, have all been downloaded to my computer. They're all in my Lightroom catalog. They're all backed up. So it's not like I have 13,000 images on my phone that are nowhere else, so that if I lost my phone, they'd all be lost. I'm covered in that regard. So here in the albums view, And you can see, if you look down at the bottom, that we are in albums. You can see that highlighted in blue. There's also some other options there. Shared, which is a way to share certain groups of photos with other people via iCloud. And then there is the Photos view, which separates images by date and also by location. So I'm going to go back in here to albums for the moment, because I want to talk about the camera roll and its role, no pun intended, in organizing your images. So the camera roll is the central repository on your iPhone where all of your images are stored. That is where the images are. So you can kind of think of that as, the folders where your images might be stored on a hard drive on your computer, all right? Now, there are a lot of other albums there, and you can see some of these here on this screen here. The albums are just other ways to organize the images that are on the camera roll. So an image in the camera roll can be added to an album, but it doesn't mean that it duplicates that image. It just means that it associates that image with another organizational structure. So for instance, let's just use a real simple one. I'll go into my camera roll here, and I have a picture that I took in my backyard here earlier today, and I'm just going to add that to my favorites. So I'll tap on the heart button here at the bottom of the screen to add that to my favorites. So if I come out now back to the main albums view, I can see that that has been added to my favorites. You can see that now as the most recent image that has been added to my favorites, that it is sort of there as the poster image for the favorites album. So it doesn't mean that that image has been duplicated in the favorites. It just means that it's now has a new association. So another thing to clarify here, in addition to the role of the camera roll, is how albums work in iOS. So albums are similar to how collections work in Lightroom. Now, for those of you who do not use Lightroom, I have another metaphor and analogy coming up here in a bit, but in Lightroom, you have images that are stored on your hard drive in a series of folders. But you can choose to add images to collections. So collections is a way to organize images based on their quality, their content. You might have a collection of favorite portraits. You might have a collection of favorite landscape images, etc. All of the images in those collections live in different folders. Just like in iOS, all of the images in your albums essentially reside in your camera roll. Having an image in an album just means that there's a different organizational attribute associated with that image. Another way to think about albums is to think of them kind of like music playlists. So if you have a song on your mobile device, you might add that same song to multiple playlists depending on how you want to categorize that music, and also what other songs you might want to associate it with. The file of the song only exists once on your device, but it can exist in multiple different playlists. So if it's deleted from one playlist, it still exists on your device, but if you actually remove the actual song file from your device, then of course it will be removed from all the different playlists. So in terms of adding images to new albums or to new, quote, playlists, end quote, to kind of channel the most recent metaphor or analogy that I brought up, let me come back here to my main albums view, and let me just go into the camera roll. Let me take that same image there of the backyard cottage, and let me just tap select up in the upper right, and I'll choose that photo, and then you can see I can add it to a different album. So let me just come down here and choose a different album to add it to. I'm going to add it to the album called In Progress. So now, if I come back out to my album view, we can see that that image of the backyard cottage is in my favorites album. And if I come back out here to the albums view and scroll down to choose my In Progress album, we can see that it also shows up down there in the In Progress album. So it doesn't mean that this image has been duplicated multiple times. There's still only one copy of this image on my phone, and it lives in the camera roll. But via an organizational association, it also shows up in two different albums now. My In Progress album and also my Favorites album. So that's the basic difference between how the camera roll works and how albums work. Every image on your iPhone or on your iPad is going to reside in the camera roll, but through other organizational associations, that same image may show up multiple times in different albums, but you still only have one copy of that image, and that lives in the camera roll. Next, let's cover the tip about removing photos from albums. Let's come back here to my In Progress album here, and I'll come down to the bottom, and I'll tap on that picture of the backyard cottage, and then I'll tap on the trash can icon in the lower right, and the message tells me that the photo will be removed from this particular album, but it will still remain in the photo library. All right, so I'll remove it from the album, and if I come back here, we can see it's no longer in that album. But if I come back up here to Favorites, I can see that it's still in Favorites there. And, of course, it's still in my camera roll. There it is at the bottom. However, if I remove an image from the camera roll, it will be removed not only from the camera roll, but also from any other album that it is associated with. So I tap on that, tap the trash can, I can see that it's going to be removed also from another album. In this case, that's the Favorites album, so if I choose Delete Photo and go to my Favorites, I can see that it's no longer there in my Favorites. All right, so we've already talked a little bit about the difference between the camera roll, which is the central repository of images on your iOS device, and the albums, but let's talk a little bit about the difference between the default albums or smart albums versus app albums and user-added albums. So here in the albums view, if I kind of scroll up here, let's talk about some of the default smart albums that iOS provides for you. The first is the Favorites, and the way that you add images to the Favorites is simply by going into your camera roll or wherever and just tapping on the little heart icon at the bottom of the screen there, and that will add that image to the Favorites. And if I come out here now, we can see that that image has indeed been added to the Favorites. Next up, we have some smart albums, several smart albums actually. We have selfies, which are automatically added if you use the front-facing camera. We have panoramas. Now, an interesting note about panoramas is that when you shoot in the panorama mode, the image will only be added to the panorama album if the preview of the panorama as it builds, as you're shooting it, extends beyond the halfway point of the screen. If it's not up to that halfway point on the screen, in the preview when you're making it, it will not be automatically added to the panoramas album. So kind of an odd little glitch there. I think that any photograph created using the panorama mode in the default camera app should be added to the panoramas album, but obviously Apple had other ideas about that. Next we have videos, which are fairly self-explanatory. Slow-mo, which are videos shot in the slow-mo mode. Time-lapse, and bursts, and screenshots. And the screenshots are created when you take a screenshot of your screen. And by the way, hey, quick tip about screenshots. If you're not aware of how to take a screenshot on iOS, it involves pressing the power or sleep button and the home button at the same time. So let me just take a screenshot of my screen right now. You see that little flash there? That means it was saved to my Screenshots album. And in fact, if I go to my Screenshots album, you can see that, in fact, there it is right there. All right, let's get out of there. Go back to the main albums view. So after that, in my own personal albums list here, I have 3 albums that were created based on syncing folders that exist on my Mac via iTunes. Now that's a whole other can of worms. We're not going to go into syncing via iTunes here, but these 3 albums that you see here that are designated as from my Mac, those were created via syncing through iTunes. Finally, down here, after that, you can see that there are 2 other albums, which are created by iOS, hidden and recently deleted. So let's talk about the hidden album first. If I go in there, you can see that I have a handful of photos there that are in that hidden album. What does that mean? Let's come up here to the camera roll. And actually, let me just delete that last screenshot that I took. I don't really need that. Let's just get rid of that. All right, so hidden. Let's tap on that fountain image here that I took in my backyard. If I tap on the share or export or save button down in the lower left, and that's that button that looks like a little square with an upward facing arrow. If I tap on that, in the screen that follows, there is an option to hide the image. And you see that right here. It's the 3rd icon in there, hide. I'm going to tap on that to hide that image. And it tells me that the photo will be hidden from moments, collections, and years, but it will still be visible in albums. So let's just take a look at that. Let's come out of here. So you can see here, I'm in my albums. I'm in camera roll, and we can still see that image of the fountain there. It's the last image there in that group of thumbnails. But if I come over here to photos down in the lower left, that's that little icon in the lower left, this is where my images are organized by the date they were taken and also the location that they were taken. And you can see that I do not have that image of the fountain showing up there. So it is hidden from that view of my photos. Just realize that if you really want to make sure that a photo is hidden so that you don't inadvertently show it to people, make sure you're not going through and looking through your camera roll, because of course the image will still show up in your camera roll as well as in any other albums. All right, so if you want to unhide an image, just tap on it again and tap on that share or export button down in the lower left, and then just choose unhide. And it will not be hidden anymore. Let's move on to talk about adding new albums. So to add a new album, you want to be here in your albums view, and just tap on the plus symbol in the upper left corner of the screen. Give a name for your album. I'll just call that New Project. And I'll tap Save. And right after you create an album, you're automatically taken to an Add Photos to this new album mode. So right now you can see up at the top, it says Add Photos to New Project. So I can choose to add some new photos there. Let me just tap on a couple of these pictures here to add them to that album. Get a couple of the castle there at the Harry Potter Wizarding World. Got a couple of book covers here that I photographed in a bookstore to remind myself that that might be an interesting book to read. Some sunflowers and a double exposure there. All right, so I'll just tap Done, and now those images have been added to that new album. So you can see down there at the bottom, it says New Project. It has 11 photos in it, and there they are. Next, what if you want to reorganize the order that the albums appear here in the list? Because new project means that, it might be a real hot new project I'm working on. I might want to have that up at the top of the list of my albums and not down at the bottom. So to change the order of my albums, I'll go up to the top right corner of my screen where it says Edit. I'll tap on Edit. And you can see that I can choose to delete albums here if I want to, just by tapping on the minus symbol in the red circle. If I just tap on that, you can see I have the option to delete it. I'm just going to not delete that album. But I also have these little icons on the right, these kind of 3 lines. That allows me to tap and drag on that and reorder the album. So let me actually just sort of move my new project album up here higher in the list. Let's see where I want to put that. So I'm going to put that right up here at the top. Now, I can't really place it up above the default album, so I'll just put it right there. So now it's going to appear right after the default albums. I'll just choose Done. And now, of course, you can see as I scroll through my albums, starting at the top with my camera roll, that my new project album actually shows up much closer to the top of the list than it did before. All right, we've already seen how you can add new albums, how you can reorder albums, and we've talked about the difference between the camera roll versus other albums, whether they are kind of the default smart albums that iOS creates, or other albums that maybe certain apps might create. Let's talk about how you can add images to an album. Now, we've already kind of covered this a little bit in some of the earlier examples, but let's just go over it again here. I'm going to go into my camera roll, and to add any of these images to an album, I'm going to choose to tap on the Select button up in the upper right corner of the screen here. Just tap on Select, and then I can either tap individually on images, or I can also swipe across images. So here on these images in the center of the screen showing the Hogwarts Castle at the Harry Potter Wizarding World at Universal Studios in Southern California, I can actually just drag across there and select an entire range of them quite easily. And then down at the bottom, I can choose Add To, and then I can go and find the album I want to add it to. So I'm going to add this to the SoCal Trip Family Favorites to add those into there. All right, so that is how you would add images to an album. So if you have a lot of images on your iPhone, as I do here, that kind of shamefully embarrassing number of nearly 13,000 images on my phone, got to do some cleanup here. But fear not, all of those pictures, or at least most of them, apart from the past couple of days, have been downloaded to my computer. They're already in my Lightroom catalog. They're already backed up to multiple places. So that's not really an issue in terms of the safety. However, it still is quite a lot of images. That's what happens when you have a 128 gigabyte iPhone, and you also happen to like to keep a lot of images around for processing on the go if you are, out and about, whatever, stuck at an airport with a canceled flight or a long layover or something like that. When you go to open an image in an app, it can be really tiresome to have to scroll back through hundreds of images if you need to find an image that's several months ago. For instance, let me just click the home button here, or rather tap the home button. Let me go out to Snapseed, and let me just tap on the Snapseed app, and I'm going to choose to open a new image here. I'm going to get rid of that old image. And I'm just going to choose to open from device. Now, if I do that, and I know that my image is in my camera roll, all right, great, camera roll, okay. All right, now I was doing some street photography on Hollywood Boulevard a couple of months ago, back in May, I think. So, to find that image, I'd have to scroll back through all of these images. Now, I was just in Southern California again for a week-long family trip, and I took a lot of images. I took like 1,300 images on that trip, so I'd have to go back all the way through all those images. Oh, let's see. No, I'm still not back there. And then I had a bunch of other images because I was working on a lynda.com course on location down there in Southern California. So that's not them. So I had to keep going back and back and back and back and back. No, that's not it. Let's see. So anyway, you can see how tedious it is to have to go back through your camera roll. Let me just cancel that. And let me get out of Snapseed here. So here's what I would recommend to you. Hot tip, a pro user tip for you. Create an album for images you know you're going to work on. And that way, once you try to access them from another app, if you place those images in that album, it'll be much easier to find them. So, apropos that, I have an album here called In Progress. You can see it's got 70 pictures in it. Let's just go into that. And these are images that I placed in here because I knew I wanted to work on them in other apps, and I wanted to be able to easily find them again and again and not have to just kind of scroll endlessly through my camera roll. Now, many of these images I'm done with and I probably don't even need to have in this album anymore. But, for instance, if I go back to my camera roll here, I can come back through, my images here and find the image I want to work with. I'm just going to go way, way back here. And I'm going to show you another better way to find images a little bit later here. But for now, I'm just kind of doing it the clunky, dumb way here. I'm just kind of scrolling back through my images because I know that that's what a lot of people do. That's what I did before I figured this out here. So here I am. All right, here we are back in Hollywood Boulevard. All right, that's all looking pretty good. Let's find the image that I wanted to work on here. There we go. It's that image right there, okay? I just really like the kind of bend of the leg that person had there with the stars there. Great. So I'll tap the select button up in the upper right corner of the screen, and then I'll just tap on that image to select it, and then down at the bottom I'll choose Add To. We've already gone over this in the section on how to add images to certain albums, and now I can add it to my In Progress album. Wonderful. So now I can come back out, and I can go to my editing app. Again, I'm going to go to Snapseed, and I'll choose Open, choose Open from Device, and now I can just go ignore the camera roll and go right down to my In Progress album, and there it is right there. It places it in the album chronologically based on the date that the image was captured, but there it is. And I can bring it into Snapseed, and then I can get to work on my editing. So I highly encourage you to create some variation of that In Progress album so that you can place images in there that you know that you're going to be working on in the near future, so you can easily find them to access them from within whatever app you're editing in. And you don't have to be endlessly scrolling through your camera roll. So as we saw in the last tip, having an album designated for kind of current in-progress images that you're going to be working on is really useful for being able to quickly find and access those images without having to kind of scroll endlessly through the hundreds, if not thousands, of images in your camera roll. However, there's another way that you might go about that, and that involves copying and then pasting an image. I'm going to go to my camera roll here. And let me just kind of scroll back quite a ways here, much farther than I would want to have to scroll if I was searching for something in an app. Because, a lot of times when we're working on our images, or rather when we're looking through our images to decide which one we want to work on, we're here in the camera roll. We're checking this out here in the camera roll. So let me just come back here into the camera roll, and let me find an image to work on. There we go. Let's just choose this one of this Superman cosplay impersonator here on Hollywood Boulevard. Now, of course, I could choose to add this image to an album, or here is another hot tip. I'm going to tap on the little share or export button down in the lower left, and then there's an option there to copy that image right there. Copy that image. I'll just choose that, copy. Great. So I'll exit out of there, and now I'll go into my Snapseed app. Now, Snapseed is an app that allows you to copy something from your camera roll and then paste it into the app as a means of opening an image into the app. Not all apps will allow for this, but some apps do allow for it. So if you know that an app does allow for it, this is another way you might quickly go from choosing which image you might want to work on, copying it, and then pasting it into the app. So for instance, here in Snapseed, I'll just choose Open. And you can see that my last choice down there at the bottom is to paste an image. So if I choose Paste Image, my image of the Superman impersonator gets pasted in there, and then I'm good to go to do whatever I want to with that photo in Snapseed. All right, so far we've kind of concentrated our focus in terms of the organizational aspects of iOS photos on the albums, working with the camera roll and the various different albums and such. But there is another way that you can work with your photos in terms of finding them and searching for them. And that's what we're going to cover here towards the end of the the episode here. So I'm going to come down and tap on Photos in the lower left corner of my screen here. I'm in the Albums view. I'll just tap on Photos. And this takes me into a view called Moments. So Moments is the finest grained view of the 3 different tiers of ways that you can view your photos here in this view. So we have Moments, and then you'll see up there in the upper left, it says Collections. So it has kind of a back button, which allows me to essentially go up to the next level. So let's just tap on Collections. And you can see that Collections gives me a kind of a broader view. So whereas before it told me the specific town where the images were, down at the bottom you can just see it says California. And there are several locations there in California that I photographed there. And then if I tap Years, it takes me way out here to the Years view. And I can view the photos just by the year that they were taken. Now, obviously, these thumbnails are super tiny here, so it's hard to tell what's going on, but here's a hot tip. If you press and hold and then swipe over a certain year, you can see the thumbnail of the image that you happen to be on, and then you could release on that thumbnail, and it would take you to that particular image and show you that image larger. So that's kind of a cool way of going back and forth. By the way, down at the bottom here, you can see that there's a list of thumbnails, and I could always swipe through and show the different thumbnails there as well. Let me just come back out here to Collections and then Years. One other cool thing that you can do is that if you tap on the name of a certain grouping of photos. So here I am in the Years. If I tap on, let's say, 2015, it is going to show me a view on the map of where the pictures were taken. Now, if I zoom in closer, it's going to show me a more kind of fine-grained view of these areas on the map. So you can see here, I've zoomed in a little bit closer here, and you can see that I have images up there in Washington State. I've got images in Idaho. I've got images in the San Francisco Bay Area, down around Las Vegas, Southern California, etc. And again, as I keep zooming in here, it just gets a little bit more precise in terms of where all these different images were taken. So let me just actually kind of pinch together here and come over to see where some of these other images were taken over here. I teach at the Maine Media Workshops more or less every year, so I've got a lot of images that were taken there in Maine. And then I oftentimes will, let's kind of zoom out here so we can see this a bit smaller. I'll teach in Iceland, so I've got some images there that were photographed at various locations around Iceland. So that is kind of a cool way to view the different pictures in your photos library on your iOS device based on where they were taken. So right now, for instance, I could tap on this location here in southern Iceland, and it will take me and it will show me the 85 pictures there that were taken in southern Iceland. So that, that's pretty cool. So let me just go back here. I'll just tap Years at the top to go back to Years. Now, if you want to get a more fine-grained view of what's going on, tap on the body of thumbnails, and that will take you into Collections. And you can see that Collections shows you kind of these more general groupings of images based on where they were taken. So you can see that it's grouping them both by general location as well as by when they were shot. So this group here in the center of the screen was shot between May 15th and May 22nd in 2016. If I want to get an even finer grained view of that, to switch from Collections to Moments, I would tap on the thumbnail view again, and that's going to get me in even closer there, and it's going to separate them out more or less by the day that the images were taken here. So you can see that, or rather by a couple of days, so you can see here that I have in the towns of Los Alamos and Los Olivos in Southern California between May 18th and 19th, they've got several images taken here. And then I can go down and I've got, other images on another day there. So that's another way that you can look at your images based on when they were shot and also where they were shot. All right, so the last thing that we're going to do in this collection of quick tips for working with iOS photos is to talk about the search capabilities. So the search capabilities can be accessed whenever you can see the magnifying glass. So I can see the magnifying glass there here in the albums view. If I go into the photos view, I can see that whether I'm in years or collections or moments, I can still see that magnifying glass. I'm going to tap on that magnifying glass just to give you an idea of some of the very cool search capabilities that are available to you based on metadata that is saved into your file. So the metadata that is available to work with in terms of image searches in iOS photos is going to be things such as date and image location. At the present time, you cannot add keywords to your images in iOS photos, but there's a lot you can actually do by searching for date and location. So you can see here up at the top that it gives me the option to search for nearby images based on my GPS location. I can search for images taken or saved to my app 1 year ago, favorites, etc. And then down below it shows me recent searches here. Now, I already have a recent search for the USS Midway, which was something that I visited when I was in San Diego a couple of weeks ago. But let's do that again. If the USS Midway was many, many months ago and it was still in my camera roll and I didn't want to scroll back through it, I could just type USS. And I don't even have to finish typing it. It automatically recognizes any other image that has been tagged with USS. So there are 3 search results that show up for that. The Midway Museum in San Diego, which is really what I'm looking for, but also the USS San Francisco Memorial, which is kind of out at the Land's End area of San Francisco. It's a memorial to a ship that saw a lot of action in World War II in the Pacific. And then finally, the USS Pampanito, which is a submarine down on Fisherman's Wharf that you can go and tour. So that's pretty useful. Without even typing the whole thing, I was able to get in here. And of course, I get to then tap on USS Midway, and I see all the photographs from the USS Midway there. So if I wanted to go back there and go and get at those, I could. Now, here's another thing I could do. Let me just tap on the magnifying glass again, and let's just search for a location. So I'm going to type in Martinez, California, and right off the bat, it comes up with 2 search results that match that, Martinez, and then also Martin Luther King Drive in San Francisco. So I can tap on Martinez, and you can see that it's picking up these images here, and here's this image of this kind of suburban Turkey that I ran into when I was driving through Martinez, so I could find that. So let me cancel that. Let's go into search field once again, and let me just type a number 1. And look what comes up. Everything that has a number 1 in the location. So that could be Highway 101, it could be 17th Avenue, 10th Avenue, 1st Street, Highway 17, etc. So all these different ways that I could potentially search for images based on the location where they were taken. And a lot of people really aren't aware of this, which is why I wanted to point this out to you. It really is very, very useful. The benefits and the joy of metadata in your images. Now, of course, you do have to have location services turned on for your camera in order for that to work. And where you would find that is if you went out here to your main screen, and then you went into the Settings app here on the iPhone. You can see that circled right there, Settings. And then what you want to do is you want to go down and find the privacy settings. That's going to be in the 3rd group of settings here. This is on iOS 9. I'll tap on privacy, and then here are location services. So I can tap on that, And then you can specify whether or not location services are being used on a per app basis. So for instance, if I come down here alphabetically, you can see that my camera app, my default camera app, it has that turned on, and I could always choose to turn that on for other camera apps as well. So for instance, Camera Plus here, at the moment does not have those turned on. I actually do want to have that turned on for Camera Plus, so I'll just come in here, tap on that, and I'll just choose while using the app. So that is how you would make sure that the location services were turned on so that you could access your images via the search functionality to search for them based on where they were taken. Well, that brings us to the end of another episode of TheFIX. I hope you found that information on working with the iOS Photos app to be useful, and I hope that it helps you gain a little bit more control over all of the images that are on your iPhone or your iPad. If you want to delve into that more deeply, I do have a course at lynda.com called iPhone and iPad Photography with iOS 9. I'll put a link to that in the show notes, and we'll also have an updated version of that course for iOS 10 once iOS 10 is released. Hey, you can subscribe to our show by going over to our website, thisweekinphoto.com/thefix, and there's a box there on the right side of the page where you can subscribe. And if you want to contact us, just use the Contact Us link at the top of the page. You can send us suggestions for future topics you'd like to see covered, or maybe guests that you'd like to see interviewed. When you go into that contact window, make sure you open up the menu and choose this show, TheFIX, so that your message will reach me. I'm Seán Duggan. Thanks very much for watching. Catch you next week on TheFIX.